What Jefferson called separation of church and state was really taken to mean the separation of politics and religion.
Right.
And of course, that's a huge mistake if I'm right about the definition of religious belief. And I've had a lot of years to think about this now, and I've seen a lot of objections, and I don't think they amount to anything. Um, this seems to me exactly right. And in fact, it was a definition discovered by an ancient atheist Greek philosopher named Anaxagoras, who held that whatever a person regarded as having independent existence and generating everything else, that person was regarding that reality as divine. And my argument here, and Professor Doywords as well, and some other people, is that not only is that the central issue in a religious tradition, that is identifying the divine reality. Is the divine reality God? Is it Brahmanatman? Is it, for an ancient Egyptian, Amun-Ra? There are dozens and dozens of, let's say, candidates for divinity, but they all regard whatever goes properly into that role as being self-existent and generating everything else. In fact, this comes out of Calvin. Calvin says, whatever is the origin of everything else is necessarily self-existent and eternal. For a guy who denied being a philosopher, he had a lot of philosophical insight. Anyway, I think that's exactly right. And some people object because things such as the gods in ancient Greece or Rome weren't self-existent and didn't generate everything else. Well, then they're not the divine. They're not divine per se. The gods in ancient Greece and Rome had more divine power than humans do.
Right.
And therefore they didn't die, but they certainly did not have the unconditional existence that Scripture ascribes to God. God generates everything else and depends on nothing. And if you take seriously the Greek myths, for example, if you read Homer, Homer identifies the divine reality. He calls it okeanos, a word from which we get ocean. And it means a vast expanse of something. And he says it's out of okeanos generates the heavens, the earth, gods, and humans. So gods are beings that have more divinity in them than do humans, and humans have more than turtles, and turtles have more than trees, and that kind of thing. So the gods that are worshipped, that can be cajoled, bribed, that can be worshipped and praised and flattered, those are not the divine per se. And both Homer and Hesiod admit that. Hesiod's got another term and another account. The ancient Romans is the same thing. For them, the divine was noumen, from which we get our term numinous. Something has divinity in it. And different things had more or less divinity collect in them. And this is what makes sense of the Roman emperor's claim to be a god. He thought he had more divinity than the average bloke on the street because he has more power. If you don't believe that, he can prove it to you in a lot of nasty ways.
That's exactly right.
He has more divinity in him. So he thought many of them took this really seriously and thought it was somehow unjust that they died. And as you know, one Roman emperor went down into the seashore and ordered the waves to stop to test just how much power he had. But he considered himself certainly having more numen than anyone else. But that doesn't make him the creator of the world. It's numen that gives rise to everything.
Now, you used Anaxagoras for your definition of divinity. Divinity is that which is self-existent and generates. I mean, that's sort of a very Greek, obviously a very Greek approach.
Yes.
What then would you say religion is? because even the title of the book, The Myth of Religious Neutrality, what then is religion? Because the Greeks, it's, if you look at, I don't know if you've read have you read Tom Holland's book Dominion?
No.
Another a book that's helping a lot of people now
Hmm.
wrestle with this question of secularity.
Uh-huh.
But because the question is, okay, so I work as a pastor, not a scholar. Someone comes to me and says, okay, so divinity is that which is self-existent and from which everything gets generated. So what? Now, the most ancient people wouldn't ask that question.
No, neither would my students. If I said to a class, what is it that's self-existent and generates everything else? They'd probably say, let's have a drink and forget it. Uh, this isn't something that occurs to the average person at any point in their average day. But the importance of it is not only that there are ancient thinkers and religious leaders who did think of that. What is it that goes in that slot? What is it that generates everything else? They not only thought about that, but they also conceived of it as something, as a reality in which humans should have the proper relationship, that maybe there are blessings to be obtained in this life or the next or both or just one or the other, that can't be obtained any other way than by having the proper relation to this absolute reality, the ultimate reality. If a tradition of thought and belief and practice arises about how to obtain the right relationship to this reality, that's a religion. Okay. Us doesn't mean that something's a religion. Our discovery, or Doibert's discovery, is that an assumption about what occupies that role is a presupposition of every abstract theory we can form. It doesn't matter what the theory's about. In two steps, it assumes some answer to that question. So there's no theory about anything, an abstract theory I'm talking about, a theory in philosophy, in science. It doesn't matter. It could be a theory about heat transfer or metal stress or how life forms diversified or the most basic nature of humans. Okay, any theory we want to propose, it either includes or presupposes a view of what that ultimate reality is. And it may not be conscious to the thinker at all. If presented with his own assumption, the author of a theory may say, no, that doesn't sound right to me. What are you talking about? He's not aware that his own theory presupposes that. That is can't be true unless that is. So that's what Doibert's work was. Based on that insight, there's no such thing as a neutral theory of reality or theory of knowledge. That's what philosophy is about, those two theories. So what he does is construct a theory of reality based on belief in the biblical Jewish Christian idea of the creator of all things.